hello to the side and back. Why did I bring that back? I've done it for years. It's still part of me. We can move on. As the title of this video suggests, this is going to be me basically talking about a lot of the stuff that I have to deal with. Specifically, the pros and the cons of having a neurodivergent brain, or a brain that is wired differently than everyone else around you. And while I did talk about some of these issues, like having to constantly validate yourself because no one else is going to be able to understand you, or the whole idea of seeing as though I'm classified as a neurodivergent person that is highly masking simply for more reasons than it needs to be, but because of several different factors blending into each other, to where when I'm actually struggling, no one notices I'm struggling. But yeah, here's the pros and cons of essentially having a neurodivergent brain. Because while I could just make an entire video ranting about all of the problems I have to deal with, specifically because my brain is wired differently, I'd rather go ahead and give you a more neutral look at all of the struggles, challenges, and also the tricks and hacks that I end up learning along the way. And though this one is not on the original list I ended up creating, the first one that I'm going to talk about is literally having to figure things out for yourself. A long time ago, I ended up doing a video where I was specifically talking about how I would explain my own spiritual path as Mess Around and Find Out. That is basically what I'm talking about. The idea of having to figure out exactly what works for you. And that itself can take up way more energy than I feel like it should. But if you're in a space or having to deal with people around you in said space that is less supportive of said neurodivergence, or just of you in general, because I understand other people have their problems and they'd rather prioritize that, it makes it that much more difficult on the person that is having to deal with the problem. However, the moment you actually end up finding things that work, it almost feels like you just won the lottery or something, until said thing stops working. Then you have to go through the entire process all over again. Now to the actual first thing that I have on this list. Being able to tell behavioral patterns, but not being able to figure out social cues. The generalization of figuring out social cues, the meaning that I'm going to specifically use for this video is not really understanding what to do in a new environment without knowing other people's behavioral patterns. To some extent, this gives the person a sense of having control over the situation, and it makes it feel more safe and familiar. Especially if you have been a high-masking people pleaser for so long. But when there's no behavioral pattern to rely on, being in a new environment essentially just kind of scares you, and you can't really do anything. And it's it almost feels like your systems are crashing. And it's less being a robot, more being an AI that is not prepared for the situation that they were put in. Next, hyper-focused attention, but only when I'm interested. Basically, I can't actually fight my brain to focus on things that it does not want to focus on. If there's something that my brain does not feel like is absolutely necessary, or does not give me the amount of dopamine that my brain wants from said thing, I'm less likely to go ahead and do it, unless there's something that I add to it that gives me that dopamine that allows me to get through it. But not every task has the ability to, not every task you do has that ability to be added on to another task that gives you that dopamine and allows you to finish it. Like listening to music while either cooking or cleaning. However, you can't really do that if you're working. Like if cooking and cleaning is classified as your job, you can't really do that because there are rules that are specifically set against it. This could also coincide with not having enough time and or energy to still do said task that you don't want to do because it's not interesting to your brain or it's not giving you the amount of dopamine that your brain is craving. It takes more energy to do things that you don't want to do is what I'm saying. The third one is essentially a validation one. And it's something I've had to deal with my entire life. From both those of my age and adults, even when I was a child. And that is asking myself, am I the actual problem or is there just a misunderstanding? And the answer to that question is usually the adult specifically thinks that you're the problem. However, there's just a misunderstanding because while your brain is specifically wired to look at things in one manner, the adult kind of thinks that you're specifically backsassing them for like no reason. This has happened several times. I've actually gotten in trouble for this. The next one on the list is actually a brain-body disconnect. It's similar to like derealization and depersonalization, where you don't feel like the body that you specifically have is the body that you should have for a multitude of reasons. It could also be mistaken as like body dysmorphia, where you kind of feel like your body looks a certain way simply because it feels that way, but when you go ahead and like look at it through other means and stuff, it doesn't look the way that you feel like it looks. It's very difficult to try to explain other than saying a brain body disconnect, but it also explains why I don't check. I have to actively shut my brain off in order to be able to feel my emotions, but I would also have to like only disconnect my brain for long enough to feel said emotions, and then reconnect my brain back to my body so I can understand exactly what emotion I was specifically feeling. And that is way too much for my brain to try to comprehend right now. The maladaptive daydreaming, which is basically a person's ability to create an entire universe inside their head. It's writing a story without writing a story. And while that sometimes is looked at as a bad thing, it also means you have the potential of creating such intricate worlds when it comes to story creation, story writing. It is asking yourself the question, fixation or psychosis. Like, is this just because it's a fixation of mine, or am I actually going crazy right now? This one was specifically brought up to me, of course, by me scrolling through TikTok because I have a lot of TikToks with personal anecdotes of people with autism and ADHD and the mixture of the two. And this one kind of like hit differently. But it is asking yourself the question, am I actually stronger? Or just playing the game on hard mode without knowing? And like once you start thinking about it in that manner, you can go ahead and start giving yourself some slack because you didn't recognize that the game itself was put on hard mode while everyone else is like normal or easy, and it's just like, what? But yeah, basically It is the struggle of having to go ahead and do the simplest task and thinking, am I stronger because I struggled? Or did I not need to struggle simply because this is an easy task? It should be an easy task. You still struggled anyway. Anyway, I will never really know whether it's simply because the game itself, the game of life, has only been put on hard mode for me. Another I will never know situation is sensory issues. Essentially, being hypersensitive, and whether that's actually psychic abilities or not. There are certain things that say that they are, there are certain things that say that they aren't, and again, it goes back to the fixation or psychosis issue, where it's just like, am I absolutely losing my mind, or am I just focusing on this one specific thing? And because of the fact that my brain is wired differently, I would have to ask someone that is essentially either gone through the same thing or is going through the same thing. And even with that, that might just validate the fact that I'm not going crazy, which might not be a good thing. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of this is having to figure it out and figure out a lot of stuff on your own. And the last one is essentially any type of task regression. For me, mainly, it is an English regression. Basically, I lived my life mainly in my head for like my entire childhood. And even though I have learned English, English is my first language, it is still very difficult for me to speak. But this doesn't have to deal with just language regression. Oh, especially when you just figured out that it's neurodivergence, and like there's this entire regression of like other things that you were really good at, but simply because of the fact that you've unearthed a truth, your entire being just acts different around that thing. For me, randomly, that regression is memory, but learning. I spent an entire year learning Japanese, and that was fun. I'm barely able to remember anything from that, by the way, because I went from learning Japanese for an entire like year and a month straight into learning Korean, and my brain can only hold but so much information that isn't completely English without losing English entirely. Yes, this might mean I might not be able to be fluent in either Japanese or Korean. That doesn't mean I can't frickin' try though. I just have to figure it out. We're going back to the first thing I said. All in all, figuring out my brain has essentially been a wild ride. And while I have made this video simply because I've gotten to a point where I'm able to like better understand my brain, this does not mean that I have everything figured out. It only means I have enough figured out to give out information. Why do I have to continuously say these things in these videos? Simply because a lot of people, something else that happens specifically for those who don't quite understand social cues, but is like very excited to talk about something. I can't tell what my tone of voice is when it comes to me doing these videos until after they're filmed. So I could just be talking simply about something that I've learned recently, or something that I was able to like collectively put together, and it ends up sounding like I'm talking down to people. And while I could try to like mask me talking about stuff like that, talking in that manner, that would be putting more stress on me And I don't really need that. The whole point that the whole thing that I'm trying to do is learn how to be unmasked a bit more, even if I don't necessarily feel safe enough to be unmasked. Basically asking myself, how unmasked can I be in certain situations? However, this is also coming from a person that did a lot of research specifically in psychology just to go ahead and figure out what the heck was wrong with me for the longest time, only to recognize that, oh, okay, it's neurodivergence. It's my brain braining differently. And here I thought it was just like depression, anxiety, or pretty much any other type of behavioral disorders that they end up giving those who are assigned female at birth, simply because society has a very skewed way of looking at mental health when it comes to those who are assigned female at birth. All in all, trying to figure out life while also reminding myself of the handicap that is being neurodivergent in our society as I know it now is tiring but very interesting. If I find enough of more things, I will make another video of this because this was very intriguing for me to do. Anyway, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified of whenever I post, and take good care of your brain, especially seeing as though seasonal depression is a thing. And with the days just getting shorter and shorter, we end up getting less and less time with the sun, which definitely affects me way more than I want it to. And other than that, I will probably see you in the next video. Peace.